everybody, I'm Debbie Montgomery Johnson, the founder of the nonprofit The Woman Behind the Smile, and your host of Stand Up and Speak Up, a show that is about each and every one of us. Many of us have something we're hiding, something we're ashamed of, something that through no fault of our own or through our own making, we keep hidden, and that in turn keeps us hidden from each other and the world. Good people go through terrible situations. Wise people know when and how to let it go. And everything that happens to us helps it grow, yet while it may be hard to see it right away, the most important thing to do is to change your perception about your circumstances. Regardless of what your personal experiences or traumas have been, this showcase series is designed to ignite the light in you, as well as providing safe harbor, education, personal growth, and resources so that no matter where you are on your journey, you'll have the courage to move on when you're ready. Stand Up and Speak Up features ordinary people who've been through extraordinary situations and struggles and found the courage to step out from behind their smiles and speak up about those experiences and the lessons gleaned from them. Everybody heals at a different pace, and we recognize that. So come on in, have a listen, and enjoy the ride at your own speed. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are listening to this. Thank you for being here. It is a beautiful day in paradise, and I love to say that for my Canadian friends. It's a beautiful day in South Florida. It's a little bit warm, but that's okay. We love it. And I'm really so grateful to have everybody here today. Before I start the show today, though, I do want to say a friend of mine, Marty Ward. Marty's been a guest on our show. She has a wonderful children's organization called Confidence Builds Success. It's all about combating bullying, and she did a lot of work over in Africa. I just got word that Marty is actually in the hospital and was diagnosed with cancer. So this group today, I know, has a bunch of mighty prayer warriors, and I ask that you send a little prayer up on behalf of Marty Ward. And if you get a chance, go to our Stand Up and Speak Up on YouTube and watch her video that she did the interview with me. It was marvelous. She was doing some marvelous work with kids and acting against bullying. So please keep her in your thoughts today. The other thing is we love to communicate and connect around the world, and I'm actually participating in a summit, a women's summit in New Zealand starting tomorrow. It's called Rockin' Midlife with Kat Colucci, and you can see it at rockingmidlife.com. I don't usually, talk about these things, but Kat, my experience interviewing with Kat and being with her across the pond was extraordinary, and we want to support women around the world with what they're doing, with what we are doing. So go to rockingmidlife.com and sign up. It's a free summit, and it goes through the weekend. Some really fun women speakers that are going to be on. So moving on to our show today, Stand Up and Speak Up. We have a great guest, and I want her just to take a deep breath, because yesterday I felt like she was a little bit nervous about this. This show, it's a conversation, and it's just a conversation, and it's fun, but we've got some really good information to get out. So everybody, please welcome Ms. Nichelle Nelson. Nichelle, you there?
Yes, I'm here. Hi.
Hey, hon, thank you so much for being with us today. She's a North Carolina girl, and, I was teasing her that, goes back to my Tar Heel days when I was in college, and I was just up in North Carolina, up in Hendersonville, and I loved it. It was a little bit cold for me just a couple of weeks ago, but it's beautiful. It's beautiful. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Nichelle and I participated in a women's conference called Faith Over Fear, and it's been a couple of years now. I was in Atlanta and then down in Miami, and it was with Monica Walker.
Yes, Monica Walker. Mm-hmm.
Monica Walker, and there's too many women to name. I did have a couple of the gals on as other guests, and so much fun. And yes, that's when I realized that each and every one of us has a story that would blow others' minds, and but what was amazing to me is that no one wanted to tell what was happening in their lives until that group. And then
right.
one started to talk, then another started to talk, and then the stories came out. What an amazing opportunity to stand up and speak up. And Nichelle, I got to tell people about you because our show is not necessarily about you, although it's going to be that way. I want them to know what a fantastic woman you are. And you sent me your bio. You've become a motivational speaker over the years, but you had spent most of your working life in the fashion industry. And I want to say here that you had experience in the fashion industry to include an assistant editor for iFashion magazine in New York. You're the assistant director of the Carolina Girls Rock Pageant and the Miss Flawless 2019. Oh, that was you. You were Miss Flawless 2019?
Yes. That was my title, yes.
Well, that's terrific. You're a former professional model, fashion show producer, event planner, runway choreographer. You're one busy fashion lady.
I have had a long career in fashion. Oh, my gosh, it's been forever. I think I started modeling when I was 9.
Wow. Well, you guys take a look. She's a beautiful woman inside and out. She would probably tell you that one of her greatest things is being a mom and a glam ma.
That's right, glam ma.
A glam ma to 2 beautiful little princesses and 4 handsome princes. So you have 6 little grandkids.
Grandbabies, yes, I do. Oh, my goodness.
Nothing greater, huh?
They are amazing. The youngest, well, she's actually not the youngest. My granddaughter, Alea, is the one that's always here because her dad is Jabari, the one that was in the accident. So I spend the most time with her. And when I tell you, she's a mini-me times 10, but she's also her dad times 10, which is a weird combination.
Well, and usually dads get payback.
Oh, he's getting it for sure.
How old is she?
She's 2. She'll be 3 in September.
Okay.
And she definitely acts like she's about 25. She's very articulate, very smart, can hold a grown conversation, and will tell you about yourself.
Well, just wait till she's 16. Woo! Payback.
Oh, yeah.
So I always like to start the show with you my guest telling our audience a little bit about you because many of the people don't know who you are. So could you kind of give me a synopsis of who is Nichelle? Where did you grow up, your family situation, brothers, sisters, and we'll go from there.
Okay, great. Nichelle Nelson. I am originally from Charlotte, North Carolina. My father was in the military, in the Army. So I grew up overseas, mainly in Germany. We've been to so many different military bases. So I kind of have a worldwide, I guess, array of knowledge here, or experience rather, not necessarily. But it's been, I've traveled all over. I've lived in Italy. I've lived in Louisiana. I've lived in Georgia, New York. I've been to the Berlin Wall. I've done so many different things overseas in Paris and Milan, just Spain, everywhere. My family, my mother and father both retired in Augusta, Georgia. I have 2 sisters. One lives in Atlanta, Georgia. One lives in Augusta, Georgia. My nieces, nephews, brother-in-laws. I have 3 boys. My oldest is 32. His name is Taiwan. My middle son is Jabari, who's 26. And I have an 11-year-old son named Tyler.
Whoa!
So, plus my 6 grandchildren from my 2 grown sons. So I stay busy.
That's why you look so young. One quick question. Did you ever get a chance to live in Wiesbaden?
I live in Würzburg.
Okay.
That's in Prasselheim in Germany is where we lived off base, but the base was in Würzburg.
Okay.
I've been to Wiesbaden. We used to have softball tournaments there.
I was stationed there. Actually, right before the wall went down, and I moved because your oldest is about the same age as a couple of years younger than my oldest. But yeah, we were over there for 3 years, right before the wall went down, and amazing experience. So
we went through the wall. As a child, we went to visit the wall, and they had those strict rules: you couldn't point, you couldn't do this, you couldn't do that. You had to kind of stand there. So it was a little frightening at first, but it was an experience.
You know, I felt the exact same way, because we actually went into East Berlin, but I was in the Air Force. I had to go in my uniform, and boy, I felt like I was being watched every move, which I was. But
yes, you were.
it was scary. It was scary, so it makes you appreciate home. So you are a well-traveled woman.
Yes.
And that's wonderful. When you were a young girl, what did you like to do? Because you ultimately went into fashion, but was that something that you liked as a child, or?
I did. I have an aunt. She was taking classes, I think it was at Barbizon or John Casablanca when I was like 7 or 8 years old. And when we moved back to Charlotte, I would go to her classes with her, and it was like the first time I had been exposed to modeling, and I fell in love, and I picked up, and I was trying to do everything that she did, and that's what started my love for the runway. And at 9 years old, and you're being told that you're great at it, it's kind of what you stick to. So I was wearing heels in, high school, because it was just something about that, that look and how you carry yourself and your posture and making sure that you keep your posture straight and everything. And so she also taught me about, etiquette and how to take care of myself and things like that, her and my mother. So that has always been, I think, my first love was the fashion industry and being a model.
That's a very difficult career for young girls, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Can you kind of explain that? Because, I work in a world where young women can be taken advantage of, and you've got to be really careful, especially as a mother in that world, not to project. But how did your family deal with you in that modeling situation?
Well, the thing about my family is we're very close-knit, and we have a very, a Christian praying family. And one of the things that I don't think I ever had to experience is some of the things that the young ladies have gone through dealing with, producers or men that would try to take advantage, or people, period, men and women would take advantage of models when they're young. But my family was right up front and present, so I didn't have those experiences. Everything went through my mother, even when I was overseas. So I can't speak on that, but I am aware, I guess, in my adult years, dealing with some models, training models who went through things, were taking advantage of, people wanting to just take their pictures for a grand sum amount, a lot of money, that didn't provide anything but pictures and made promises that they couldn't keep. But that was just how things were a long time ago. I know they say it's still kind of like that, but if you know the business and you study and you do your homework, you can't get taken advantage of if you are informed. And that was one of the things that I tried to do in my career, is to make sure that the models that I trained or the models that I coached or worked with were informed. I made it my business to know the rules and the regulations, to know what you could and could not do, and to stay away from the people who were just trying to exploit you.
Okay. Because it's tough. We don't want the young women, hurt in any way, mentally, physically, or whatever, and then, given this idea that they're the greatest thing since sliced bread, but then taken advantage of, and they're beautiful. Now, a lot of the pageants, and we'll go into this briefly, though, it's about education, though. It's not necessarily just a fashion thing or beauty thing. Can you kind of explain, how the education part comes in? Because that is very valuable.
Well, with the educational part, as a director for Carolina Girls Rock, one of the things that Rock Pageant is one of the things that we do with our young ladies, ages 5 to 19. We make sure that we instill the self-love, the building up their self-esteem, their courage, giving them the courage and the strength to believe in themselves and to love themselves and to deal with their inner beauty instead of worrying about what the outer beauty looks like. Yes, you take care of yourself. Yes, we talk about, your health and staying fit and eating healthy and taking care of your skin. But it doesn't matter what size you are. That's not the focal point. It's who you are inside, how you present yourself, being able to hold a conversation, being able to interview and speak to people with eye-to-eye contact, and knowing who you are. Those are the educational things the fundamental educational things that we try to teach our young ladies. And some of them are, right now, I think we have about 4 or 5 of our pageant queens who won the pageant who are now best-selling authors. And they're not even over 12.
Wow.
So it's important to teach, the self-confidence, the self-love, your self-worth, knowing that you can do and be anything that you want to be. So that's kind of where our training is now, and that's what I stand on and our philosophy for what we teach these young women who go into the modeling, who go into the bigger pageants. It's about who you are and making sure that you hold yourself accountable. We make sure that they don't wear makeup. The younger ones, they cannot wear makeup. So you got to be able to be comfortable in your skin and know what that is. And we encourage our young women to make sure that that's their foundation, and the parents love it. We have some girls that have been with us since they were 4 years old, and they stay. So I think that's a great thing nowadays, the focus point being.
Well, I honor you for that because it does start with the self-esteem. And I remember, listening to the women in the faith over fear. So many of the stories of women our age came from not really having the self-esteem and the self-love when we were young women. And
exactly.
led to abuse and different things that took place, and then we just kept quiet about it. And
right.
I think in my daughter's case, I actually put her in karate. She became a 2-stripe black belt because I said, Jenny, if you ever want to date at 16, you have to have your black belt.
Right.
I wanted her protected, and she was a very active physical girl. And so I think by giving your girls that foundation, that gives them a leg up, and they may not, they won't stand for the abuse because they'll recognize it,
right.
And feel comfortable in themselves. So that's wonderful. And I'm looking at the picture of you, which it's one of your glam pictures, and I'm thinking, what a beautiful glamour.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for doing that and for providing a safe place for your young women. Now, our show today, I named it Flawlessly Flawed to encourage, uplift, and inspire. Where did you come up with the flawless? Where did it come from?
Flawlessly Flawed came through, I guess, a poem that I was writing, and I had a conversation with God, and I was looking at how perfect God is, right? And when you have a relationship with Him and you understand who God is in your life, you understand that He's perfect and He's flawless. Everything about Him is flawless. And He created us in His image. And so being flawless people, humans that He created, we still are in sin. No matter what people are going to sin, we are flawed. And that's kind of where that name came from, because through Christ, we're flawless. In His eyes, when Jesus washed away our sins, He made us flawless in His eyes. But as people, as humans, we're still flawed. So that's kind of where that flawlessly flawed came from.
So you want people to understand, though, in spite of our flaws, we still can be wonderful, inspired, encouraged, uplifted, be extraordinary. It's just we're on our path to perfection. We're just not there.
Absolutely.
And so that became the foundation of what you teach the girls, and that's what you speak about now?
Yes, that is what my purpose has been, to share my faith, allow people to see the things, the trials and the tribulations that I've gone through, in hopes that it can help someone else recognize what they're going through and realize that they have the strength to make it through, as long as they trust in God and they have that faith, and they have to exercise that faith. They have to activate it.
Okay. And that'll segue into your story about Jabari, because you've got three kids, right? 3 kids?
Yeah, 3 boys.
Yeah, the 3 boys. Jabari is the same age as my youngest son. Football player, grew up very strong young man, right?
Yeah, definitely.
The middle child, but he was the youngest for a very long time. Obviously, your 11-year-old.
Years later.
That was kind of a bump.
15 years later.
Which is really interesting because I remember my youngest always wanting a younger brother. And I'm like, oh, sorry, bud, you're not going to get it out of me.
Jabari wanted that so bad. He wanted that so bad. But it came from because in between Jabari and Tyler, I lost 3 babies.
Okay.
At 20 weeks pregnant. So we went through several losses. And that was kind of the motivating factor for Jabari because he's like, I really want a sibling. I really want a little brother. And it happened. And it was a miracle. Tyler was completely a miracle because I did not think that I would ever be able to have any more kids.
I'm just having this stupor thought when you said that because my show last week was with a gal named Elizabeth Meyers, and Elizabeth and I both lost babies. She lost one at 14 weeks. I lost one at 19. And our whole show last week was about that, about how it's so difficult to speak about a child that you lose. It was even hard to describe, that they died preborn. It's kind of an odd way to put it, but she's like, it's not a miscarriage. She goes, I didn't drop my baby. I didn't lose my baby. I know where he is. But in her case, she actually delivered, and they treated her like it wasn't a baby. So I didn't know that you'd gone through that, and I'm very sorry for your loss on that. Because I know personally it's one of those things that it just takes you by surprise. Because a miscarriage prior to 9 weeks, I always think is kind of considered regular if you're going to have a miscarriage. But that second trimester loss is really difficult.
It's difficult.
How'd you deal with that? I was going to talk about Jabari, but we're going to do about this for a minute.
Okay, it was very difficult because, my first child after Jabari was a little girl, and I had wanted a little girl. That was like all I had been dreaming about. When I found out it was a little girl, I was elated. And about 2 weeks later, something happened, and I developed an infection. I had to deliver her, and it was a life or death situation. I didn't want to let her go. If I didn't let them take her, then I would die as well. So that decision had to be made by my then husband, who was not there. He was overseas. He was in the military as well. And they took her. I had to have her. I had to deliver her. All 3 of the babies I actually had to deliver. They have names. I had to hold them. I had to bury them. So it's not a miscarriage, and a lot of people have that misconception. It's a loss. You lost your child, and you still have to grieve because you carried that baby for 5 months.
Yep.
And you're showing, and you're very pregnant, and you look pregnant, and you feel pregnant, and so it's not just like, we're 6 weeks in, I can't even tell, nobody knew. You move on. A lot of people do, but it's hard. And so I lost myself with her for about 1.5 years. I was mad at God. I turned my back. I didn't go to church. I turned away from my family because I was so depressed. I didn't understand why he would have taken her away from me. And then after the second, I got pregnant again, maybe 2 years later. My husband, of course, is still in the military. He was in the military the whole time, but he was away in school. And I lost the second one. The first one was 19 weeks and 5 days. The second loss was 19 weeks and 3 days. The third loss was 19 weeks and 1 day. And so as you can imagine, still having to deliver these children, someone would say, oh, well, you should stop trying. You're just putting yourself through turmoil and all of this other stuff. And it was just a difficult time. But after the second loss, I turned back to God. And I learned, my minister at the time, I was here in Charlotte, he sent me to this foundation called KinderMourn, an amazing organization that helps you deal with grief and deal with loss. And they put me in a support group with other parents who had just lost a baby. We were all there together and all newly lost kids. And what I learned in there was that they had lost probably as many as I had. And we all shared the same pain. And it was easier to talk about it. And one way to deal with it was to talk about it and to, give our make sure that our children's legacy lived on, and make sure that we talked about it, and make sure that we honored them every year and throughout the year, and talked, and kept their names in our hearts, but still being able to move on and be healthy and still be vibrant and still give to our other children. And everyone in that group has had children since, including myself. And mine was a miracle. I wasn't expecting to have him. He was actually a shock. And I was in New York with him, with Tyler, and I had a specialist who helped me get through it. But my reason they kept telling me was that I had an incompetent cervix. And that wasn't the case. I had what they call thrombophilia, which was a blood clotting disorder. And so with the specialist in New York, I had to take shots every week. I had to be monitored. I literally, Tyler has a photo album of ultrasound pictures.
Oh, wow.
So every week I had doctor's appointments, and Tyler came at 36 weeks, healthy, perfectly fine. And the funny thing about it with God is thrombophilia is usually a blood clotting disorder that you have for life. I have friends who have it, who's had it, don't have any kids, and they have to deal with that for life. I only had it while I was pregnant. So that lets me know that it was not time for my other 3 babies because of the things that I was going through, but it was time for Tyler, and he made it through. So he's my rainbow baby, and that has carried me on throughout my life, and just my faith in God and understanding that every person has a purpose and every child has a purpose. And if it's in God's time, it's going to be in God's time. And all we can do is trust him and have faith in him that he's making the right decisions for us. And then it becomes, I won't say easy, but it's a lot less painful.
Well, and I'm really glad to hear that there was that support group, because when Elizabeth and I were talking last week, neither one of us had a support group. And we both have had children, we had children after the fact also, but during that time, no one talked about it. And no one knew how to talk about it. And our husbands were both in the military. And I always liked talking about, how did the husbands react to it? And she said for her husband, it was more like he was grieving the loss of a stranger, where she was grieving the loss of a child, which as a mom, there's a difference. And I think the same with my husband too. After a while, they're kind of like, well, come on, move on. It's over. Move on.
It's over with.
Did you have any of that experience?
I didn't at first, because it would have been my then husband's first child, and he was not there, but he was the one who had to make the decision to choose me or lose us both.
Oh, wow.
And it was a difficult thing for him, so he also went through that grieving phase, but he dealt with it in a different way, and that is actually kind of what started our division in our marriage. It definitely separated us, and he went on and did the things that he needed to do throughout his career, but I was still stuck, and so that kind of drove a wedge in between us. And if you don't have a foundation, a spiritual foundation and a connection through God, that can happen. I can't speak for anybody else, but that's what happened for me.
Did he join the support group too, or was it just you?
He came to one meeting. He came to the first meeting, and after that he didn't. The other husbands actually were there every time. He did not.
Yeah.
He couldn't deal with it. He was like, I'm not.
Well, that's one way of dealing with it, but it really doesn't deal with it, and that does breaks up a lot of families. So you felt the loss of a child, or multiple now. So let's fast forward to Jabari. Tell me the story of Jabari. He seems like a phenomenal young man. So he'd gotten through college and he was well on his way.
He's an amazing young man, and he it's funny with him because he's always been my sidekick. My oldest son was always gone and traveling and he's a free spirit, so he was doing his own thing. So it was usually just me and Jabari. But Jabari was my football player. He started playing football in all sports actually at the age of 4, and that's all he thought about was football and science stuff. My mother used to work at a science store, and that's all. He was fascinated with science and astrology, and he loved football and basketball and anything else that contained the ball. But he went on through high school playing, and he went to college. He went to Reinhardt University first, and then he transferred to North Carolina Central. His whole dream was wanting to be in the NFL. There's a funny story really quick going back when he was 5. For his graduation for kindergarten, all Jabari wanted was his own football player, his own NFL player, a real one, and to go eat all-you-can-eat crab legs. And he hates when I tell this story, but it's the funniest thing because that's what he wanted. And so I provided that with him. I had some friends that were in the league, and Ernie Mills was one of the players who actually lived in Charlotte. I think he was playing for Dallas at the time. And he played football with him in his backyard and showed him all his trophies and everything, and he truly fell in love with the game then. That's kind of what set his path. And so he knew he wanted to be in the NFL from age 5. And so that was what his journey was. We did combines, we did football camps. I supported him in all of the things that he wanted to do. When we moved to New York, I wanted him to model. That was what I was like, okay, you can make money now modeling. You've got Tommy Hilfiger putting you on a fashion show, and you want to go finish your football game. And I was really upset with him, but he's strong-willed and strong-minded. And that's what he chose to do. And so I said, okay, it's your choice. So just being able to support him and push him through his dreams and his career was my main goal. And that's exactly what I did. When he graduated from college, he was trying out for different teams. And from transferring from Reinhardt to North Carolina Central, I felt like he had the bottom end of the stick. He had a bad deal dealing with the coaches because the coach that recruited him to the new college left the day he got there. And so now the other coaches don't really know who he is. He didn't get as much playing time, so his chances of getting seen by an NFL scout during the pro scout things that they did were slim to none. He had to constantly work to prove himself. And, what I appreciated him was how hard he fought. Always a fighter, always determined to fulfill his dreams. And even when things didn't happen, he still was able to press through. He ended up being signed to an arena football team here called the Carolina Energy right before COVID happened. Then COVID stopped that season. Then they were bought by the new owners, Thomas Davis and Ted Ginn Jr. and Joe Moss, along with the head coach, Urban Bryson. They changed the name to Charlotte Thunder. So he signed again with the new team, and then his accident happened before the season even started.
So let's go to the accident. He's 25 years old. Was it during the day, at night? Kind of give me a feeling of what was going on.
So Jabari he's been working third shift for probably 2 years now. And so he would get off at like 8 o'clock in the morning. He had a very strict routine. He was rooming with one of his cousins. He has a dog who is more like his son that he takes care of. Loves the dog since he was born. He treated him like a baby. He normally goes home. He would normally go home, let King out, feed him. Then he would either go to sleep for a few hours or he would go to the gym and work out and train depending on what day of the week it was. He also coached kids, youth football, and he did his own athletic training. So usually around 2 o'clock every day, he had kids that he was training and mentoring, and then he would work out. And he had a strict routine. So, and normally he would call me in the mornings before he would go to sleep or right after he woke up. And the night before, it was just kind of ironic. He texted me at 12:51 a.m. I'll never forget it. And it just said, "Night, Mom, love you." Just random. I hadn't talked to him since earlier that day. And I said, "Good night, son of mine, love you more." And that was the last time I spoke to him. I got up that morning, I texted him, and he didn't respond. I was like, well, he probably went to sleep. About 10 a.m., 11 a.m., I hadn't heard back from him. Texted him, he didn't respond. And I think I laid down, took a nap, woke up about 5 o'clock, texting him again saying, where are you? How come you haven't answered me? And I went through probably for an hour calling and texting him, telling him, you're scaring me. I'm going to call the police. Please answer me. This isn't like you. And so I start calling his friends. I called his best friend. I had her looking for him, calling his coworkers that she worked with, and I called my cousin who he lived with, and she said, you know what? He hasn't been home. And I said, wait. At that point, fear just crept in. I'm like, what do you mean he hasn't been home? She said, he hasn't been home. King hasn't been let out or walked. I was like, well, can you please take care of King? And now I've got to find my son because something's wrong. At that moment, I knew something was wrong. No one called me. I didn't find out about the accident. I told my niece, well, let me back up. I was getting ready to leave to go find him. His coworker said he left work at about 8 o'clock. He wasn't tired. He was fine. He said he was going to go to the gym. He was going to go home first, and he was going to go work out. And that was the last time they talked, and they would usually talk throughout the day. So I said, well, I'm going to go to his job. He worked out in Concord. I'm going to go to his job and kind of retrace his steps on how he comes home. Then maybe I can see his car. At this time, we were dealing with a lot of tension in the area as far as the police and different things that was going on. And I'll just be honest, with my son being a young black man, that was my first thought. Oh, my goodness, something has happened. He's had an altercation. But he's an armed officer, and I was still worried about him. So I'm like, okay, well, maybe his car is on the side of the road. Maybe he had, fell asleep or pulled over or anything. And falling asleep is just not something that he would do. So that wasn't even on my radar. And of course, that's not what happened in this case, thank God. But, you don't know as a parent what's happening. You come up with all these thoughts and all these fears and all these things creep in and, try to scare you. But my niece, I told her, I said, call the police, call the hospital. I'm going to call the police, or I'm going to call AT&T to see if they can track his phone because he didn't have his Find My iPhone on, which I used to always tell him to make sure you have that on. That's so important. Keep that on. I'm not trying to look and see where you are. I just need to know where you are if I need to get to you. And he didn't have that on. So that was nerve-wracking. And she called me back. I was on the phone, and she was like, Auntie, I need you to answer the phone. I found him. And she said they had him at the Carolina Medical Center in Charlotte, but they didn't know who he was at first, and they just found out who he was, and they have him listed as watch trauma. So he was pretty much a John Doe in the ER. He had been go ahead.
So real quick, that was one of the questions I had. They weren't able to trace like his license plate or his registration or something? I mean, I saw a picture of the car. It was a horrific accident.
Yeah.
But there was no identification in the car?
Everything was in the car. Everything was in. His wallet was in the car. His phone was in the car. He had his gun permit in the car. He had his gun in the car. The car is registered to him. The tag is registered to him. Everything was on point. Why they couldn't figure out, because you could read the tag, the back of the truck wasn't hit. Yeah. So all they had to do was run his license plate. And I'm his mom. I'm on everything. So no one called me. They didn't notify me. They didn't do anything. The hospital didn't. They just went into save his life mode, right? Because his injuries were so severe. They were in save his life mode. They weren't Nobody called me.
Well, you want the hospital in that mode, but you'd think the police department would call.
Absolutely, and they did not. Didn't even try.
You found out from your niece, and then you ended up going to the hospital?
Yes, I was on the stretch of highway called 485, and right before I got to 77, I would have continued out 485 to go to Concord, but right before I got to 77, she told me that he was at the hospital, so I dashed down 47 in the express lane, and she gave me the number to call, and they said that I needed to call the trauma ICU because he had been moved there, and his accident had happened at 8:39 in the morning. I didn't find out that he had been in an accident until at 6:40 p.m.
Oh, my goodness.
So I hadn't heard from him all day. I started looking for him around 5. I didn't find out till 6:40 that he was at the hospital. And, of course, my heart just dropped. And I called. The nurse was so amazing. She was so concerned about me before, because I was driving. I was like, okay, well, I know where he is. Is he alive? And she said, yes, he's alive. And I said, okay, I'm okay. Please tell me what's happening. I'm still coming to the hospital. I'm not pulling over. She wanted me to pull over. And she told me what was going on. By the time she got to the point to where what his injuries were, I was at the hospital. And that wasn't very close at all. So I was speeding. Yes, I was. But she told me, she said he went into the back of a tractor-trailer truck. There was an accident up ahead, according to the police, that was like a 5-car pileup, and then other cars and vehicles were slowing down or stopping or slamming on brakes or whatever. I really don't even still know what happened because he can't quite remember. He's starting to remember certain things, but he said that he didn't see the brake light come on, so he was trying to go around the truck, and that he doesn't know what happened at that point. And she said he had traumatic brain injuries. He had about 4 different areas of his brain that was bleeding. He had had a seizure at the accident, and he had a seizure in the emergency room. He'd never had seizures before. He had, his left arm wasn't moving. They didn't know at the time what was totally going on other than that there was nerve damage, and they weren't getting any kind of feeling or sensation in that. But he was unconscious. He was in a coma. They had him on life support. And so to hear that was a trauma for me in itself.
But no broken bones, right? Amazingly?
No internal bleeding, no broken bones, thank God, other than the brain trauma that was going on. So nothing that would keep him from living other than his brain function.
Yeah.
And they didn't really know at that time, because there was swelling on the brain, what that was going to look like until a few days later.
Right, and the compound problems, this was during COVID.
Absolutely.
Could you get in to see him, and if so, when?
I did not. I got to the hospital. Miss Kathy FaceTimed me so that I could see him over the phone, because I wasn't allowed to come into the hospital. She didn't have to do that, but she did. And she was like, I wish I could get you up here. There's nothing more. And he was just laying there. I think I sent you that picture as well. He's just laying there with all these tube things and monitors hooked up, the life support, the ventilator thing that he was on. And it was just difficult to see, sitting in my car in the parking garage at the hospital, my son laying there, and I can't touch you, I can't hold you, I can't tell you to come back to me, I can't try to help you. So I totally had to activate my faith and rely and trust in God and pray. That's the only way I got through it. And for 2 days, I sat in that parking lot waiting for his COVID. They had to do a COVID test on him, or they did a COVID test on him when he came in the hospital. And I had to wait before I could see him for his results to come back. They didn't test me.
Wow.
They just screened me. They screened me. but they had to test him before I was allowed in the hospital, which to me didn't make any sense. I think it was in the very beginning phases, so they didn't really know what, there were so many different things that was happening. You can do this and you can't do that, and then, oh, no, you can't do this and you can't do that. So it was just really confusing at that time for everyone, so I understand. But for the first 2 days, I wasn't allowed into the hospital.
Did you have any issue with them telling you what was going on? Because he's over 18. We've brought this up in previous shows about the HIPAA releases and parents, if you have children over 18 but not married, you need to have some sort of, form signed by the kids saying you have access to their medical records, because the hospitals don't have to tell you anything. Did you have any trouble?
I didn't have any trouble.
Bless your heart. I'm so glad. I'm so glad.
Look, I am not that mom. You would have had more trouble trying to not tell me something and me coming up in there than you would have by not telling me. I can't even imagine them not telling me information because he's over 18. Oh, I would have had a heart attack. There's no way.
Yeah.
I would have pulled every string known to man to make sure that happened.
Just an FYI, though, for parents that do have kids over 18, you might want to look into the HIPAA forms, because I have kids that are not married and they're over 18, and I know with colleges that no one had to tell you anything about their grades or about what they're doing. I mean, they're legal age, and so just an
right.
FYI, I'm so glad that you didn't have that problem. So
I did have that problem in college, though. But I think because of the circumstances, they were different. Because he was on support, he's not able to comprehend or speak for himself. So they have to be able to talk to someone, which would be the next person would be me.
Okay.
So I think it's different when it comes to your life or death situations. College, he had to have permission. I had to have permission in order to talk to his professors, which he gave me. But yeah, I think it's totally different.
Okay, so he's in an extraordinary situation in ICU. You're sitting in the parking lot. At one point, when did they allow you in?
The third day. I got a call the third day. I got a call. I had been on all night for 2 nights with watching him. She literally set up her iPad in his room so that I could watch him, and I would be on there all night long.
Oh, wow.
Just and breathe. And I didn't get any sleep, and I was in the hotel. I went to a hotel close by because at the time I wasn't out here in Mooresville. We lived in Charlotte, but I was still about 20 minutes away from the hospital. And when they called me to say, you can come in, I wanted to be down the street. And so I stayed at a hotel. And that Tuesday, that was a Monday morning when it happened, Tuesday evening, one of the nurses called me and she said, his COVID test came back negative. You can come in the morning, because it was after visiting hours. And I could be there at 8 a.m. I was there at 7:50 because I was in the parking lot at 7 a.m. I was in line ready to go in, and that was the hardest thing I think I've ever had to do, was to get up the courage and to have the strength to go up into the trauma ICU unit to see my son. And I couldn't walk through the doors. I couldn't breathe. And I had a young lady by the name of Miss Shannon who sat at the front desk, and she wasn't even supposed to be there, but I thank God for her. And she told me where he was, and she saw me hesitating. She got up and she was like, okay, it's okay, I get it. I didn't have to tell her what was wrong. She said, well, let me show you around the hospital, the trauma floor, so you'll know where everything is. And she walked me through. She's like, okay, this is the bathroom. This is where we have a refrigerator here if you need any snacks or drinks or anything. And this is where the nurses triage is. And we have this over here. There's a waiting room on this side. And before you know it, we were standing in front of his room. And she said, okay, are you ready? And I was like, okay, I'm ready. So she took my mind off of my fears on what I was going to see. She said, he's unconscious. He may or may not be able to hear you, but I need you to not freak out.
Wow.
And I said, well, I've already seen him through FaceTime, so I knew the condition that he was in, and I had already had time to process that. So when I walked into the room, it didn't freak me out, and I didn't get, I didn't start having a whole heart attack and crying and screaming and everything. I went in very quietly, and I kind of just took it all in, and I sat there, and I just looked at him. So I had to put my things down, and the nurse came in, Miss Kathy, and I met her, and, I was trying to breathe. I think it was just taking it all in and trying not to cry. I did cry. There's tears, but it was just a hurtful cry, a sigh, being able to just be in his presence in the room. And she came in, and she kind of explained to me what was going on, and she said it's about time for us to try and wake him up, and we've got to clean out his stomach and pump out the stuff that's in the fluids and stuff. So he might have some jerking reactions, but that's just his body responding to what we're doing, not necessarily his brain waking him up. So it was just a response, and it was time for them to do that by the time I got in there. And so she didn't want me to be in there, but I wasn't going anywhere. Mm-hmm. And I held his hand while she was doing that, and I just I was like, I'm going to be here. I don't care what it looks like, what it feels like, I'm going to be here. And that's what I did, and I stood through it, and I actually recorded part of it. I recorded, and now people are like, how could you record? I've recorded Jabari his entire life. It's natural. It's a natural instinct for me to record him doing everything. So for me to record was for him to see where he was when he came out of it, because I knew he was going to come out of it.
Any doubt in your mind that he wouldn't?
At first there was, because when I didn't know what was going on. And I kept telling everybody, if I could just get in there and touch my son and hold his hand and talk to him, he will wake up. Mm-hmm. I have that much faith in God, and I knew that he heard my prayers, and I knew that he had my son and that he was going to protect him. I knew that once I got in there and my son heard my voice, he would wake up.
Did the staff encourage you to talk to him or play music or do anything?
They said that he could have stimulation every 2 hours, but not too much.
They wanted his brain to rest, I suppose.
They wanted his brain to rest. They wanted him to heal. He just kind of needed time to heal.
You said he did wake up on that third day?
He did.
On his own, or did
me? From me holding his hand, talking to him, and she did the thing where she pulled the stuff out of his stomach, and he started coughing and everything, but he wasn't awake, and he wasn't pulling breaths on his own. And I grabbed his hand, and I said, Jay, it's Mom. It's Mom. I need you to hear me. I need you to get up. I'm here. You're safe. It's okay. And I just talked to him. I think I talked to him for a good 30 or 45 minutes before he started opening his eyes. And his eyes were kind of moving around as I was talking, so it was like he was finding I think of it as him finding his way back to me, because you could just see his eyes starting to move, and they hadn't been. And she told me, and I even have her recorded saying, she was like, he hasn't had any brain activity like this in the last 4 hours since we started talking and trying him this morning, and definitely nothing overnight. So she said, already since you've gotten here, his levels have improved. And I knew it. And then he woke up, and all the doctors and nurses started running in, and he was trying to sit up and trying to pull stuff, and they had his hands in restraints and these big things that look like boxing gloves so that he wouldn't hurt himself, because they said once he wakes up, if he woke up, that he would be traumatized. He would be trying to figure out where he was, because he doesn't know what happened. He's been unconscious since on the scene.
He pulled out of it so quickly, right? Because you were told originally that he could be in there months.
And so because there were severe trauma, they did not know how he would recover. It could be 6 months. It could be 3 months. They didn't know. They were not sure. Everybody is different, but generally speaking, it could be between 3 to 6 months before he could come out of that coma.
Well, that wasn't his plan.
Wasn't God's plan at all.
God's plan or Jabari's plan.
Jabari's like, I'm getting up. I'm getting out of here. I got to go. My mama's here. I'm all right. I got to go.
Well, bless your heart. And I mean, our hour has flown by. But what I do want to do, because he's still in recovery, but he's got out of the hospital quickly, went into like an outpatient thing. Where is he now?
He's at work.
Oh, really?
Right now. Yes, okay. He is currently back at work. He lives with me still. He was in the hospital for 11 days, and then he went into rehab for another 3.5 weeks. They weren't expecting any of that. His progress every single day shocked the doctors and nurses, so much so that they had the students coming in, looking at him and evaluating his situation because it changed drastically every single day. He improved in therapy every single day. They weren't supposed to have me in the rehab hospital, but they noticed when I was there, he worked harder. When I wasn't there, he didn't want to do anything. He didn't want to get up. He didn't want to, participate. And so they allowed me to be there. And so I was there. And I pushed him, and I'm like, you are beyond amazing. That is what your name is. He also raps and writes his own music and sings and everything. And I'm like, that's your name. That's the songs that you write about. You put your life and your things that you're going through in your music and not even knowing that you were going to need your own music to get through it. So you need to get up. You're beyond amazing for a reason. And I would push him, and I would be right there by his side. I was like, I got my sneakers on. What we doing today? We walking today? We trying to walk? We getting up? He couldn't even hold himself up in the bed. And so he just, he fought through, and he willed himself out of there. And when they didn't know, I moved, and they didn't know what type of environment, what type of status he would be in. So I needed to have a place for him to come home to that would have access to his wheelchair. Well, I wheeled him out of the hospital on that day, and he was able to get up and walk with his quad cane. Everybody was shocked. Everybody was shocked after 32 days total. And he had traumatic brain injury.
So now, was there any residual damage from the TBI, or does he remember any of it either?
He doesn't remember the accident exactly. He hasn't lost his memory, but when he went unconscious, that's like he doesn't remember how it happened.
Okay.
And he sees flashes of things now, I think, finally. He does have nerve damage in his left arm, and he has brachial plexus in his left shoulder that is healing very well because he's able to do push-ups now. But he still has he had shattered glass in his arm that I think damaged his nerve in his arm that goes down into his left hand. And so his left hand is his fingers are curled. It's numb around the base of the hand and up through his arm, but he's starting to get feeling back in there, so I'm thinking that the nerves are regenerating. But he does still have that, and he did have an MCL tear in his knee that is healing, so he kind of has just a little gait when he walks. But other than that, his mind is clear. He's doing pretty well. He's back to working. He's able to drive again. He hasn't had any more seizures. I mean, he's a miracle.
Well, I'd love to talk to him at some point, too, because it's the resiliency and, moving forward. And I'm going to let this show go on a little bit longer just because I think it's such an interesting conversation. But I am going to open it up to our guests that are on if they have any questions. I have Deborah has come on, and she actually.
Wow, what an amazing story of love, and I commend both of you for your tenacity and your faith, and I thank God for this story and this recovery. My question is, what, if any, potential does he have to pursuing NFL dreams or even some type of coaching within the NFL if he's not able to play?
Well, he is still coaching the Little League football. He is still a part of the Charlotte Thunder pro team. They just recognized him over the weekend for his resiliency and being there and being a part of the team, which is where he did the 22 push-up challenge, which shocked the world, shocked everybody. But he wants to still play football. I can't fathom ever allowing that to happen, but he's grown and he has to find his own way. So he's determined to at least push himself and work back to where he can get his body in shape to be able to train. If he cannot play football again, I don't know whether he will be allowed to or not. I know that he would love to if he is okay. But as we've seen with his recovery, nothing is impossible with God. And so I don't deter him from that. He knows how I feel. I voice my concerns. But, I mean, this young man has made it when they told him he couldn't. And things that he's doing now, they never thought that he would do. His neurologist is in total shock. Like, his mental capacity, his mental stability, everything about him is on point, on track. And they're just shocked. So I won't tell him not to play. He knows the risk and he knows the dangers, but it's what he loves to do. He has thought about coaching professionally with the arena team. They told him that he would always have a place with them. And so I think we're looking into that going forward, but he is definitely still mentoring and training and coaching the kids, and he still has his Beyond Athletics Foundation football combine that we did last October, right after he got out of the hospital. He'll have another one this October, so he's still going to be very active on the coaching level. We just don't know how far up he's going to go, but I don't see any cap on that. I think that he can go all the way.
So, Nichelle, again, we could talk a long time. This is a most amazing story. I just give you credit as a coach mom or a mom coach for the love and support that you give him. I wrote down here the value of support and the value of family. Actually, we have another caller. Donna is coming in. Let me get Donna. Donna, are you there?
Oh. What is your next step for you and Jabari? Because you're always by his side and you're always doing things with him and for him. What is your next step to make this grander than what it already is in your support and love for your son?
Well, I created an event that we are putting together for Jabari. He told me a couple of days ago, after coming to, I guess after a conversation with God that he has, and realizing where he is in his life and what he wants for his future, that he wants to be able to speak. He said, Mom, the next time you go out on tour, maybe we can go out on tour together because you can speak and tell your story, and then maybe I can come behind you and speak and share mine. And that sent me into overdrive. It was like, oh, my goodness, you want to speak, you want to share your story, you want to encourage and uplift others. I'm going to create an event to make this happen, and that's what I'm in the process of doing. I've booked a venue. I've scheduled it for July 23rd, and that's going to be his very first speaking engagement coming up, and I'm so excited for him because people need to hear his side of the story. He's such a motivational person, and he's so inspiring, and you can see his love for life and his newfound reality of life has totally changed, and I'm so proud of him. But I'll be there encouraging him 100% of the way, 3,000% of the way, just making sure that I support him, making sure that I push him, and continuing to be there for him. So that's what's next on the agenda.
Thank you, Donna, and that's a fantastic event. It's so interesting that so many of us have sons that have been through experiences that they would benefit from speaking up and standing up about it. So, boy, I encourage you to do that. And when you come down to South Florida, let me know because I've got my sidekick youngest. We'll get on stage with you. It'd be lots of fun. So,
well, we need to plan that, Debbie, for sure.
Yeah, we do. You know, it's amazing. And that's what comes out of these great collaborations and just sitting down and finding out about somebody on a more genuine level than just, Facebook, hi, how are you? So
right.
Thank you, Nichelle. Thanks, everybody, for listening to Stand Up and Speak Up. We are dedicated to encouraging you to remove the mask of embarrassment and to being your best self. This episode has been sponsored by BenfoComplete.com, a vitamin supplement company that supports happy and healthy hands and feet for those with neuropathy. If any of you or anyone that you know struggles with the pins and needles or numbness in their hands and feet, check out our Benfo TME products at BenfoComplete.com and use the special code STANDUP for 5% discount on your purchase. Again, thanks everybody for being with us today. Go to my website, thewomanbehindthesmile.com, for additional information and resources. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and watch the replay of this with pictures. And enjoy your great day. Again, thanks everybody for being with us. Stand up and speak up. Beware and be aware of those around you. Have a great day. Thanks.